We just got to be prepared. The media is watching it. Both sides have monitors out, and it'll happen in plain sight. So people just have to be ready to be responsive and be nonviolent. But the federal government has issued warnings that there's potential for violence following this election.
And I'm talking now to General Russel Honoré, who oversaw that security review of the attacks in Washington, D.C., the infamous attacks on January the 6th after Joe Biden's victory. General, welcome back. I think we've got a clearer line to you now. Can I put the question that I tried to put a moment ago, which is from your point of view as a logistical security expert, how far is it possible, General, to plan to meet the kind of outbreaks of violence which are possible in this case?
Well, around the Capitol, they've already put what we call elephant fences back up. They didn't go up the last time until right before, in preparation for the inauguration. They have already gone up around the Capitol. So they've taken additional measures in our nation's capital to secure the Capitol and the Congress. So that's already happened. As we were talking earlier, I suspect if there's anything tonight, it'll be celebration type organic gatherings that local police should be able to handle. I do think if the violence does come, it will come at a place and time where there are contested elections in those states, and there have been many of them targeted out of the 7th Sanctuary, and that should be able to be contained by the local governors and their police force. But the bigger issue I worry about is a repeat of 1/6 that's focused on the counting of the electoral ballots. So we just got to be prepared. The media is watching it. Both sides have monitors out, and it'll happen in plain sight. So people just have to be ready to be responsive and be nonviolent. But the federal government has issued warnings that there's potential for violence following this election.
All right. So there'll be some concern about the possibility of celebrations, maybe with counter demonstrations as the calls are made over the course of the next 24 hours or more, but maybe a particular concern when the results are certified by states. So maybe you're looking out for possible trouble in state capitals. And of course, you're looking at January the 6th when Congress certifies the result. Now, this is something which looks so odd, General, to people from where I'm from in the United Kingdom, where we don't have a problem on anything like the scale which is familiar to you here. Many, many Americans legitimately and legally own guns. Now, in 2020, here, we didn't see much of that kind of lethal violence. It must be a worry, mustn't it, again this time round?
It always is a concern for violence. But a statistics that's not reported, 70% of Americans don't own guns.
Right.
So, but the people that do own have multiple guns, and we're the most violent nation in the world, as we can see with all the mass shootings that occur in our schools and our public places, and that's a scorn on our nation because many of our states have adapted open carry. Can you imagine going down the street and see somebody with a long gun on their back or on their hip, or going to a local store? It happens all the time in America now because of some of the open carry. We have that in Louisiana now. An 18-year-old can walk around with a gun, but they can't buy a beer.
Yeah, trust me, that is something which does look, as you rightly say, so very odd to so many people looking at it through British eyes. And I guess now you've got the additional, this comes up in so many conversations, General, you've got the additional complication of social media. And it seems to be being used by this group or that group to band together, to share their feelings and share their plans of what might or might not happen. Social media does make the calculations and the risks that much more complicated and that much more worrying.
Absolutely. The last election for president, we had a lot of what we call fake news, people making up their own data. but we see a more concentrated area over these last 2 years leading up to this election of basic misinformation. And I think some of the politicians have taken any filters off, even attacking opponents with threats of violence, of using profanity on the political stage, things that in years past would have been something to knock a candidate off of the even being competitive. But with the advent of social media and people saying anything with no filters, they've gone way beyond rhetoric to the misuse of the internet for misinformation and putting memes up that are just straight out lies and fabrication. And we do also have been documented there's foreign interference from Russia, who put out a video showing some immigrants laughing about they had voted in Georgia, and that was a complete fabrication. So misinformation is there, along with some of our major news media favoring certain candidates, and they have repetitively tried to put misinformation, fabrication, and even control negative comments that the candidate might say, and they don't report it on their station, but they attack the opposition. So we're in a dynamic environment. The good news is most Americans are not listening to this. The bad news, some of them get their news from some very narrow channels that are very partisan. And that concerns me. And we had a recent thing happen where the owners of 2 newspapers voted no on taking side in the election. And that scares the hell out of me, that oligarchs who have the money to buy these media outlets, it started with Fox News. Now we see it at the LA Times and the Washington Post, where the owners are telling the reporters what they can report, what they can't report. And that's moving toward a Viktor Orban type government. And that scares the hell out.
Well, that's a clear picture of your particular concerns, General. I must ask you about foreign interference now, because as we are speaking, literally as we're speaking, General, the headlines are dropping that in the state of Georgia there have been bomb threats to polling stations. Do not seem to have been serious bomb threats in the sense they did not represent a serious threat of a device being exploded, but they had the effect of disrupting what was going on. They stopped what was going on by way of the polling process, and the Secretary of State of the state of Georgia is attributing that to Russia. That's a very clear illustration of the kind of foreign interference which has got so many people concerned.
Absolutely. And hopefully they'll get quick control of that and redirect those voters. Georgia is a pretty red state in terms of its governments, the majority of government. But even in the last election, the governor and the Secretary of State stood up and made sure the election was fair and free, even after getting a lot of pressure to do something otherwise. And I think they will maintain the integrity of the vote. The big challenge now is to get people to the polls and get past these incidents, because it may happen more and more as we go through the day in some of these swing states, as we call them.
Yeah, I think we have to anticipate that as very, very possible. General Russel Honoré, thank you so much for joining us on the program today.